Well, I think it's pretty incredible that you were able to get the engagement and the volunteers and all the support that you did in your community because, one of the things that I talked to someone else on the podcast about, and one of the things that we've just been noticing with Gen Zers and voting is that, voting in general with young people at like the national level is not that high. But at the local level, it's far worse. And I think people, when you ask them when they're younger or something, if they want to grow up and if they want to serve in office, it's oftentimes like, I want to be president or I want to serve on the Supreme Court or maybe I'll be a senator. But no one really says, I want to be the city commissioner, right? But they should,
Yeah.
because there's an incredible amount of influence and impact that your local government can have on your community and where you live. So what did you learn during your time as a city commissioner about the role and influence of local politics versus national politics?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, and I think that's a really good point that you make, Vivek. It's like there are so many young people who are really passionate about issues and about public service, but they either don't really know. So many of us don't really know where to start, and or we are sometimes a little bit of a victim of like shiny object syndrome. Where we look at the presidency or we look at U.S. Congress and we think, oh, like that's what I need to aspire for. That's where we can make real change. I mean, it's in the last decade, like how much real change has actually come from Washington, if we're being honest, right? Like this is, I was an intern in the U.S. Senate for a little while, and it was it was a cool experience in some ways because I had never even been to DC really before then, but on the other hand, it was kind of disillusioning. I mean, the culture of DC is very cynical in a lot of ways and very transactional, but also it was just like there's not a whole lot getting done. It was also 2017, so for me personally, kind of a demoralizing period in American politics. But like getting involved at the local level, what I've learned is that people really will, even if they disagree with you on like one or two specific issues, like when I was talking about affordable housing, like if we're being honest, there's a lot of people who voted for me who probably wouldn't like the idea of like the house next door to them getting converted into a duplex or something, or a triplex, or they wouldn't like the idea of an affordable housing complex being built near their neighborhood. But at the end of the day, like even if they disagreed with me on that specific issue, they may have really agreed with me on the issue of preserving our lakeshore and our natural areas. Or we need to have some economic development to allow young people to stay here. And I think when I was talking about transparency and accountability, everybody really kind of connected with that. And I think that what it really drives home to me is that it's kind of like one of my personal role models is Jason Kander, who's a former candidate for Senate in Missouri. He was the youngest, I think, the youngest statewide elected official at one point in Missouri. And he kind of says like people really just want to know that, and I'm paraphrasing, but he always says like people just want to know that you genuinely care about them, and that even if you disagree, that disagreement is coming from like an honest place of like concern for your community and for people like them. And so if you can at least establish that credibility with people, that's what I've found is the most important thing in local government, is just being accountable to people, letting people know that you care, listening to them. I mean, some of the most rewarding things that I've done as a commissioner in Marquette are things like somebody calls me the day after a blizzard in Marquette. We get a lot of snow, and they're like, "Hey, my street hasn't been plowed. It's like noon. What's going on? Can you help me out?" And I pick up the phone, I make a phone call, and then they send me a text a few minutes later or an hour later, like, "Hey, my street's been plowed. Thanks, I appreciate it." I mean, that's the kind of thing that I find to be really rewarding. And I think a lot of people would find it to be rewarding if they gave it a try. And if you want to run for higher office someday and be involved at a higher level, that's great. But I think that getting involved at a local level first will actually not only make it more likely that you will succeed in that endeavor later on, because you'll have that base of support from your community and from your region, but also it'll just make you a better public servant and a better elected official. I think that if every member of Congress was forced to serve on like a local city council like this or a local school board for a couple of years before they entered Congress, that probably our government would be a lot more productive, a lot more civil, and a lot more like representative of the people.
Well, I love that answer. I love that point of view. I think, like you said, it's super important that we have people interested in learning about local government, serving in local government, and recognizing the conversations that need to take place so we can see quicker, more immediate, and more efficient change in our communities. So thanks for sharing that.